Pablo has this amazing ability to take something that is very complicated, such as the secret doctrine, and put it into a very simple, accessible language, which makes it very accessible for the number of people who are interested in studying the secret doctrine, but finding it a little complicated and a little unnerving. So I have to say, from a personal point of view, that I was one of those people. And I belong to a theosophical family. And, you know, the secret doctrine has always been something that I've sort of said, yeah, okay, I'm going to study this and I'm going to study this, but I'm not going to go into it too deeply. But Pablo, through his work, approaching the secret doctrine and evolution of the higher consciousness, both books are available for sale, they've made those concepts much easier for people. And there's many people that are now wanting to read and study the secret doctrine because of the work that he has done. So without further ado, I'm just going to let him cover the first 5 stanzas of what we've previously covered in the previous sessions of the Secret Doctrine Forum. So.
Thank you, Ananya. And good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Let's check it, and let's check online. Perfect. All right, so as Ananya mentioned, what we are going to do this morning is an overview of what has happened in the first volume of the Secret Doctrine up to the point where we are going to pick up in this forum. So what I've done is to take like the essence of, or try to take the essence of the different verses that we call in Sanskrit shlokas. For those who may not be familiar, the Secret Doctrine is based on a series of stanzas, 7 stanzas for a first volume that talks about the development of the cosmos. And each stanza has verses, a varying number of verses, which Blavatsky called them shlokas. That is the Sanskrit word for verses. So I try to take the essence of what the shlokas are saying, so that we don't get bogged down in the details and we can have this more panoramic view of what's going on, what Blavatsky is trying to convey there. Of course, this is not something that she wrote. This is something that at least she claimed she translated from a secret text. So she translated the stanzas, and then she added some commentaries to help us understand it, and many times to confuse us even further. Because the commentaries need commentaries upon the commentaries. So anyway, so the first stanza, which is called The Night of the Universe, Blavatsky, what you have down there is how Blavatsky described very briefly what's the core of the stanza. So she says the first stanza describes the state of the one all. This phrase one all is important in the sense that this is not the one that then we have a second and a third. This is the one that is the totality, the unity, an undivided one. So the state of the one all during the period of rest. In the Secret Doctrine, there is a cyclic model of the universe that is proposed, where the universe manifests, as Blavatsky called it. Michel was trying to find the traditional definition for the word manifest, and today, unfortunately, has to do with manifesting your desires, manifesting this and that. Blavatsky uses it in a philosophical sense. The manifestation of the universe, she didn't want to talk about the creation of the universe, because the point of view of the Secret Doctrine, like the point of view in the Platonic tradition, like the point of view in the Hindu tradition, is that there is an ultimate eternal principle that is never created, and that is the foundation for everything that appears in the cosmos. So rather than creation, there is a manifestation of, as we are going to see, different aspects of that one all, but there is nothing that is created out of
nothing. You know, ex nihil, nihil fit, I think it's in Latin. Out of nothing, nothing comes. So there is a period of rest, then there is a period of manifestation where the one all becomes the many. That again, you know, when we talk about these things, language really fails. The one never becomes the many, because then that means that it ceases to be the one. And Blavatsky says that's not really the case. The one is always there, and the many is an appearance, an illusion. Within the one, there is the appearance of a manifold universe. But all those many are nothing but the one. Now, in the first stanza, the many are not there. There is only the one. She said, and she calls it pralaya, which is a Sanskrit word that means dissolution or rest. She says the stanza is there before the first flutter of reawakening manifestation. So basically what the stanzas do, or the first stanza does, is to describe what was the universe during its night, during the night of the universe. And of course, since there is not the many, when you describe that state, it's one of negation. There is not this, there is not that, there is not that. We may ask, what's the purpose of describing something in terms of what it is not, as opposed to what it is? But this is something that all spiritual teachers with deep, looking in a deep metaphysical way, find. They cannot describe something that is beyond the things that we know, and what we know is the manifestation. We have words only for what is manifested. So there is a problem when you define, let's say, the ultimate reality, call it God, if you define it in terms of what we know, because then we project onto God feelings, because we have feelings and we know feelings, or thoughts, because we have thoughts, and then we imagine the ultimate reality being just an enlarged human being. Now, that's inevitable to some extent, and we will see that in the secret doctrine, but when talking about the ultimate reality, unmanifested, we have what is called an apophatic language, a language of negation. And you know, you see this in Neoplatonism, in Hinduism, in Buddhism, etc. So she says, the only thing, or the stanza says, the only thing that was there was the eternal parent, the boundless space. These are my words. I rephrase the shlokas so that they are more understandable. The shlokas are full of technical terms. So there was only the eternal parent, the boundless space. Space, she says, is the only mental representation that we can picture while we are working through the senses. So if you think of space, space itself, and this is an absolute space, not a relative space. You know, when you see Einstein talking about the theory of relativity, you have a space that can be bent, that can be stretched. From a theosophical point of view, that's not space, that's the ether that fills the space. Now, the word ether in science is complicated, but actually Einstein said once that what he was proposing, this space-time fabric that he called it, was a kind of relativistic ether. Anyway, when we talk about here space, we are talking about an absolute space, and a space that is immutable. And that space has infinite dimensions. We say that space has 3 dimensions, you know, but it's not space that has 3 dimensions. It's physical matter that has 3 dimensions. Anything that is physical has height, you know, width, length, but that's not a property of space. It's a property of matter. And there are objects that are 4-dimensional. In math, you know, they can figure out how a cube would look from a 4th dimension. And of course, in quantum physics, they talk about 11 dimensions, etc. So Blavatsky would say space can accommodate infinite dimensions. The dimension belongs to the kind of matter that is there. So when there is no form, there is only the boundless space. And this is something that, as you'll see in the afternoon, Michelle is going to talk a little about that, but that the ultimate reality is boundless space has an important implication in terms of what's the reality within ourselves too. Because when you experience your higher nature, you can see mystics, etc., describing that experience, it is always an experience of being boundless in space. Because that the same reality that is the ultimate reality in the cosmos is obviously the ultimate reality in us, because we are part of the cosmos. So at that, and Blavatsky says this is the eternal parent. It's funny, I have some friends from Argentina here, and in the, we don't have a neutral word for parent in Spanish. So they chose to put father. Now the shloka treats parent as feminine. The shloka says the eternal parent in her invisible vestures. But I guess the Christian conditioning was too strong for the translators, and they put the father space. So it's important that this principle, if we have to assign any gender, is feminine, because that space is the womb of the cosmos, within which the cosmos will develop. And that's also important to understand. It's not that the absolute reality is something out of which the cosmos comes. And then we have the separation between the creator and the creation. The cosmos develops within the space of the ultimate reality, in the womb of the cosmos. Now, at that point, during the pralaya, during the universal rest, that space, Blavatsky, or the stanza says, is slumbering. There is a lot of allegorical language here, and the idea is that it's a space that is passive, that is latent, that is not actively manifesting. That space is wrapped in the spiritual essence of matter. So in the theosophical view, matter, not as we know it here, the physical matter, but the spiritual essence of what will become matter is there from the very beginning. It's not that consciousness is higher and matter is lower. Both consciousness and matter and energy, they are all siblings. They are all at the same level. And they are there in essence from the very beginning. There was no time. Again, any mystical description of a mystic that has gone deep enough, they will talk about this state of no time, or the eternal now, for example, etc. So whenever you touch a level of reality that at least reflects this ultimate reality, because there are different levels of this, you will find this kind of state, a state where there is expansion, there is space, there is no time. There was no mind also. The shloka explains there were no celestial beings, there was no cosmic mind, there were no human beings. Again, you say, okay, what's the value of saying there was not this, not that? But you can interpret this as a description of the mystical state. In the mystical state, you are beyond mind as consciousness as we know it, as thinking. Then it says there were no separate individuals to produce suffering or to being liberated from it. You know, life in the cosmos is basically a dance of these two things. We act. When we act without wisdom, we produce suffering, and then we seek paths to be free from suffering, whether physically, emotionally, mentally. But that requires that we feel ourselves separate. When we act as separate individuals, we produce suffering, and then we seek ways to be freed from suffering. But this is implying that if you could act not with a sense of separation, perhaps you go beyond the level of producing suffering and then seeking to transcend the suffering. Only unitive darkness filled the boundless all. So there was only darkness, and Blavatsky explains darkness is not a question of absence of light. Darkness is there because for us is no consciousness. We only know dualistic consciousness. We only know myself as opposed to what is not myself. We only know space between myself as opposed to something that is not me, the relative space. Everything we know is this relative. Relative means that in relation. So everything we know is relative. It's about how things look when contrasted with myself. So duality is the basis for the consciousness that we know. Now, when there is not a dual consciousness, it looks for us who are trying to understand it from the dual consciousness, it looks like darkness. Now, when you see this description, I mean, I've been connecting it to a mystical state of consciousness. But if you don't do that, if you say, okay, there was a time where there was only space, no mind, no time, no consciousness, you would say, okay, that's a state of death, a state of nothingness. And then you think manifestation when the logos appears and consciousness appears and actions appear, then that's the real thing. So this rest, well, is something that we need to go through, but this is the time of death. Manifestation is what we really want, right? But the stanza says that it is at this time that everything was immersed in absolute perfection. So perfection is the state here that seems to us death, and imperfection is this state that we are normally so attached to. And this again, you can find it in many spiritual teachers. Even when Jesus says, in order to enter the kingdom of heaven, you have to die first. You know, this is something that is part of the spiritual path. What is an expansion of consciousness or experience or understanding requires something that for the previous state looks like death. And this is what I think prevents us from moving forward, because we have to face some kind of death before we can experience what is beyond. So this is the ultimate death, the death of the separated self, but it is described in the stanza as a state of absolute perfection. And what we need to keep in mind is that we don't know what that state is, because sometimes this state, like in the conventional idea of nirvana in Buddhism, they talk about nirvana's extinction. Extinction of everything we know, extinction of every function of the mind that we know, and some people interpret that as nothingness. Okay, it's death, it's the end, it's nothingness. But that's not, in several passages you see that the Buddha connects nirvana with a state of bliss or a state of perfection or things like that. So we should not have a materialistic view of these things. If we have a materialistic view, we will say, okay, when there is no mind, no time, none of these things, there is nothing. But what Theosophy proposes is that what is there, when this is not, that is the real thing. You cannot even imagine. So don't try, because anything you imagine will be a projection of what you know right now. Like thinking that heaven is paved with gold, because we like gold down here, so obviously heaven has to have, streets of gold. So if we project our ideas into what it is that is beyond, we will just project our own ignorance. So this is why philosophies, when they go to the ultimate, they use this apophatic language, this the via negativa that the Christian mystics would call, or neti neti in Hinduism. This is not, this is not. Krishnamurti many times would say, don't define what love is. If you understand what love is not, and you can get rid of that, you can transcend that, what is left is love. So this is a mystical path that the first stanza is taking. And then everything rested in eternal non-being, which is the one being. There again, something that is typical in mystical treatises is to use paradoxes, contradictions. The voice of the silence, the non-being, which is the one being. So the idea to convey here is that in that state, there is no sense of being as you know it, but it's not simply absence of being. It's a completely different experience of being that you can call the one being. And then the all-presence, stretched, boundless, infinite, causeless, as if in dreamless sleep. So again, in that state, when we look from here, it looks like if it was a state with no mental activity. Dreamless sleep is that state of consciousness where there is no mental activity. That doesn't mean that there is no being. You know, it looks like, it's just like in meditation. If you are in a deep silence, it looks like if you are asleep. And if the deep silence has no mental activity, yeah, it's similar to how the brain is when there is deep sleep. But there is a presence there, the all presence stretched boundless. So in meditation, there can be a clear presence that is beyond time, that is perfect, that is beyond thought, that is beyond suffering and all that. But looked from outside, it looks like in dreamless sleep. So that's the first shloka. This is the universe in its state of unity, perfection, and therefore non-manifestation. But things are not going to stay like that. There will be manifestation. There will be an engaging in imperfection. You know, Pythagoras used to say number 2 is imperfection. The moment you come out of the one and there is 2, that's the basis for imperfection. But that's also the basis for relationship, and that's also the basis for unfoldment. So in the theosophical tradition, there is the idea that consciousness needs to alternate. It comes into imperfection to unfold potentialities. It goes back into perfection to rest in that potential that has been unfolded. And then it comes out and unfolds deeper aspects of this amazing potential that is in consciousness, and then goes back and rests in the fruit of that unfoldment. So that's more or less the rhythm that the secret doctrine proposes. Any comment or question about this before we go to the next one? Yes?
Well, just a sense, does the secret doctrine teach that there is continuity between manifestations on Manvantara? In other words, we don't, there's no way we can comprehend it, but the results of the last Manvantara are there, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Even though they're not manifested, then when there's another manifestation, that comes out, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yes, so Blavatsky says that during these periods of rest, it's not that you lose all that had been developed in the previous cycle of manifestation. Everything goes back to the one, but there is some kind of memory there that when the one manifests again through the many, those many are picking up from what happened in the previous cycle of evolution. So the divine sparks, the monads, which engage in the process of manifestation, they are absorbed in the one, but then during the period of rest, but then those same monads are emerge from the one for the new cycle. How that happens is very, we are talking about things our mind cannot really comprehend. But what I've seen in theosophical teachings is that everything is relative. So when we talk about the night of the universe, we are talking about the night of our universe, and I'm not talking about parallel universes. I'm talking about that there are deeper realities that go beyond what is happening in the universe that awakens or not. So probably that memory is staying on deeper or higher realities, so that when the cycle finishes, everything is absorbed in that higher reality, and then when another cosmos begins, that higher reality engages in differentiation. But if you think very carefully about all of this, you will get to contradictions. And Blavatsky says that. The problem when we talk about an absolute reality is that it's ineffable. Ineffable means unsayable. You cannot say anything about it. She says anything that you can say about it will dwarf that reality or will be mistaken or misleading. Of course, she wrote about that reality. I mean, we are communicating through words, and words are offered, but with this idea that this description is just a hint, it's not the reality. You cannot describe what is real. So somehow there is continuity. It's not easy to think how that can be.
I'm curious if you could apply the idea of ignorance to the idea of darkness in what you were speaking about earlier, like
Yeah.
darkness filled the boundless all.
Yeah, Blavatsky says we call it darkness because we, in our inability to perceive the real, in our ignorance, we only see darkness. But it's not darkness on that level. But when we look about that, and she says, you see in the stanzas that the idea of darkness is relative also. So if you talk about the logos that emanates in the absolute, the logos is light when compared to the absolute reality that is darkness. But then the first logos, when the first logos manifests in more concrete aspects, like the third logos, then the third logos is darkness when compared to the third logos. So this is a question of perception. Whatever is beyond your level, for you is darkness. And you see this in the Gnostic myth of the demiurge, the creator of the physical universe, that he was produced by higher angels, but he wakes up in the physical plane and he's unable to see that there is a higher reality. So he only sees an empty universe and says, hey, I'm the highest God here, let me create something. And because this was a lower God in the view of the Gnostics, he created a flawed universe. But there is that idea that he couldn't perceive the reality of a higher state. That's the case with all of us. And that's people who don't have a certain spiritual sense. They are materialistic because when they look into anything that seems spiritual, they cannot perceive it. So that's always the case. Yes, Judy, go ahead.
Yes, just briefly, when the first line of the stanza of Zion says, once again the eternal parent wrapped in her ever invisible robes had slumber for 7 eternities. What is meant by the 7 eternities? Is this a number or is this just a figure of speech?
Yeah.
What do you think?
So Blavatsky said that the word eternity in ancient languages never meant what we call sempiternity. I think that's how it's called today, an unending extension of time. Eternity was always a eon, a cycle. So these 7 eternities are 7 huge cycles. And Blavatsky says it's not that necessarily that there are no cycles going on during the period of rest, but the period of manifestation has 7 big cycles, and she says the period of rest is the same as the period of manifestation. So we can talk about 7 eternities that the cosmos is in rest during 7 cycles and will be in activity during 7 cycles. But here again, we are beyond time, so it is allegorical in some way. Again, on a higher plane, there may be some other transcendental time, but from the point of view of our universe, there is no time at the moment. Although at some point the stanza says, when the hour strikes, then the universe begins to manifest. So there has to be some mechanism that is activating or manifestation or pralaya. But again, anything that belongs to the absolute, we have to be very humble intellectually and say, we don't know how that works.
So that activating force that you're talking about that moves it from, pralaya to activation and so forth, that's not fohat?
No, fohat comes a little later, but it can be the essence of fohat. Fohat is already within the manifestation. Subha Rao, who was a early theosophist, a disciple, just like Blavatsky was, of the same master, he talked about like Daivi Prakriti as the unmanifested fohat, the unmanifested aspect of fohat. There is some motion there, and that motion may be the essence of what will become fohat later. So what the slokas show is that manifestation happens because somehow there is a change in the motion of that spiritual essence of matter. Again, motion when there is no time is hard to understand.
Yeah.
If you get any quality and you raise it to the absolute state, you will see that both qualities are synthesized. So for example, we have motion and we can see, the finger moving, let's say. Now if you start accelerating this, if you could accelerate it to absolute levels, my finger would be in all points of space at all times. So it would be still, but it would be moving. So moving so in an absolute level, always the opposites are synthesized. So there is the way that I visualize it, there is an absolute motion which is stillness, and manifestation begins when somehow that absolute motion slows down and ceases to be absolute. But again, that's just my speculation. We really can understand that.
Physics is finding out.
Yeah.
So
All right, let's continue. Then there is the second stanza, the idea of differentiation. And Blavatsky says, this stage is so nearly identical with the first stanza that it must be left to the intuition of the reader to grasp the meaning of the allegorical phrases. So here, again, nothing is really happening, but there is some language that indicates preparation. So if you had to think of key words of the stanzas, this is something that Michelle is going to to work with in the afternoon, so you can start thinking of that. The first stanza we said it was rest, unity. You can think of some keywords that would describe the first stanza. Now, in the second stanza, there are different keywords that you can sense from the description. So let me show you a little what the stanza proposes. First, it talks about the mother of the gods that rested in the bliss of non-being. We just saw the non-being, the one being, but now you will see that the stanza begins to talk about characters that will have a place when manifestation begins. So here there is a mention of the mother of the gods. Then there is a mention of the builders of the universe. Again, the builders of the universe were in their celestial perfection. So they were still absorbed in that oneness, which is perfection. But now this shloka starts talking about the mother of the gods, the builders of the universe that will manifest from her. Then the shloka says, but there was only ceaseless motion of the eternal breath. You see, breath gives you the sense of a rhythmic motion, which knows itself not. So we don't have dualistic consciousness yet. And then the hour had not yet struck. But it's talking about the hour that is going to be struck. So you see that the language, the state seems to be more or less the same, but now we are having a language that is foreseeing what is going to come. So the ray that comes out of the ever darkness had not yet flashed. And the mother lotus, which would be the space, had not yet opened for the one ray to enter. So here there is this duality that is not yet duality. The father, the mother, the ray, the space. And had not yet, that the true aspect had not yet become active and therefore separated. The universe was still concealed in the germ of the cosmos, the divine thought of the Father and the divine bosom of the Mother, who were still one. So this stanza, as Blavatsky says, is quite similar to the first one, but it's a preamble of what is going to happen. And you can try to find analogies in your life. Again, I think this is part of what we can do with the secret doctrine, to see where do you find the first stanza in connection with you, in all kinds of things. Like, for example, in the cycle of the day, when you are sleeping, that would be like the first stanza, right? And then when you are beginning to wake up, but you are still not awakened, then that may be connected to the second stanza. But then you can apply this also to meditation, to different states. You can apply this to the different principles of a human being, the different levels of consciousness. Again, Michelle will show some examples of this, but I think we are trying to encourage the students to see, because Blavatsky says this that is describing the cosmos is describing also everything within the cosmos. I don't want to go too much into this because, as I keep saying, Michelle will talk about that. But the idea is that here we have a map for everything that happens in the cosmos. And if we can start looking at the secret doctrine from that perspective, we can find very interesting and practical applications of that. All right, so this is a short stanza. It's like a transition before we go to the awakening of the cosmos. I don't know if anybody has anything to say or ask, or we move on. All right, and then we come. Oh, was there anybody there? Okay. Then let's go back to. So then we come to the awakening of cosmos. Blavatsky sometimes spelled it with K to talk about, like, sometimes he would talk about the universe or the cosmos referring only to our solar system. Sometimes he would talk about that referring to the whole universe. And she meant to differentiate the two by using cosmos with K, like from the Greek, for the wider cosmos, but that was not necessarily respected. You know, throughout the writings, the secret doctrine went through many proofreaders that were students of theosophy, and that distinction is not very clear there, so just take it with a grain of salt. But Blavatsky says, the stanza 3 is about the reawakening of the universe to life after the period of rest. It depicts the emergence of the monads, or the divine sparks, from their state of absorption within the one. So you see, this is what we were talking about. When everything is one, the divine sparks are absorbed in that one, but when manifestation begins, somehow those monads which were one now become many. Now, because we know that that the manifestation is called is said to be an illusion, an appearance, in some aspect the monads never cease to be one. During manifestation they appear to be many, but they never really cease to be one. So that may help us have a sense of how this works, absorption in the one or being the many. Well, these are just two different points of view, not two different realities. So the first 6 shlokas or verses talk about the beginning to this awakening. And see that the phrase that the stanza uses is, or the word is vibration, movement. So the last vibration of the 7th eon, the 7th eternity, thrills through infinitude. So you see, you have the infinite space, and then there is a vibration that thrills through that space and awakening the primordial cosmic substance simultaneously through the whole universe. So you can think, we said that the essence, the spiritual essence of matter exists throughout all space. And at the end of the last moment of rest, there is a vibration that activates the totality of that substance simultaneously. To me, this speaks against the idea of a Big Bang coming from a center. And the Big Bang has a lot of problems for scientists. When you postulate that something comes from a center, you start generating a lot of problems that then you have to invent more and more patches so that your theory works. So there are many scientists that are abandoning the idea of the Big Bang from a center, and they are proposing something similar to the secret doctrine, a cyclic model of the universe, etc. But the idea is that this vibration is in every spiritual atom of that substance. So this is something that happens at every point of space at the same time. The hour comes and that substance begins to vibrate in a different way everywhere. And another way in which the shloka shows it is with the idea of darkness and light. Darkness radiates one solitary ray of light, the divine thought, which shoots through the inert primordial substance, which the shloka calls the virgin egg. Remember, I'm rephrasing all the shlokas here to try to present it in a language that can be more understandable, but this inevitably includes my understanding of the shlokas. So then go to the secret doctrine and see the original language. But basically here there is the divine thought that is connected to light, consciousness, and from that darkness radiates a ray of light which goes through the whole of that primordial substance that was inert. And the shlokas use also the image of an egg, a virgin egg. Blavatsky would say, why in Christianity there is the idea that Jesus was born out of a virgin. Now this virgin birth is in many traditions. And the idea is that the first birth, the firstborn, the first son of God, all the firstborns in the different mythologies come from a virgin. Because there is no duality at the time. There is no external source of fecundation. You have the substance, and the vibration is the essence of that substance. So it's not that something from outside comes and fecundates or impregnates, the womb. So that's why you see virgins, the deities coming out of virgins in so many traditions. And then that ray, that vibration, condenses that substance that was inert into a mass of active cosmic matter, which the shloka calls it the egg of the world, or the egg of the solar system, or the egg of the cosmos. There is a condensation of a mass that we see in the galaxies when galaxies are being created, or solar systems. There is a condensation of matter there that begins, and that matter begins to differentiate. The shloka says, becomes 7 inside, 7 outside, and aggregates in clumps spreading throughout the depths of space. This is something that science has observed. One of the problems with the Big Bang is that if all matter and energy comes from a center, from a single force, it should be spread uniformly throughout the whole cosmos, and then there would be no possibility of forming planets or any structure. A structure is when matter comes together. Otherwise, you would have just a sheet of evenly distributed atoms in the cosmos. But they use the word clumps. They somehow matter clumps and starts producing these structures. And this is one of the patches they have to add to the Big Bang to allow to produce this. They invented the idea of inflation. It's merely an invention. There is no proof of inflation, but the cosmic inflation could explain how matter would get into clumps. Now, from the secret doctrine postulates that this is the natural result of what will become Fohat later. There is a force of attraction in this vibration that starts making matter aggregate. And cosmic matter now is radiant light, full of activity, fire, heat, and motion. And darkness, the state of absolute rest, vanished and was no more. So this is the first act in the process of manifestation. You have that inert spiritual essence of matter. There is a vibration that changes its quality, and now matter becomes activated in a sense, and then it begins to be full of this activity, fire, heat, and motion. And we see that even in the theory of the Big Bang. The first stage was one of intense heat and fire, motion, and all that. That seems to be true, if we look from the point of view of the secret doctrine. Now, see that the secret doctrine talks about an egg, because in this matter begins to be incubated what will become the logos of the system, the God of the system. In Hinduism, you have this. The primordial matter is said to be a shining egg, the Hiranyagarbha. Hiranyagarbha in Sanskrit means just that, brilliant egg, within which the creator is being incubated, is being developed. So somehow, as this matter develops, that matter begins to awaken to consciousness. Here is where it gets challenging to understand what the secret doctrine says, because it's not presenting things in the typical way that you think, okay, a creator separated from matter. This is all a unity. Matter, consciousness, energy are all together, are all one. Blavatsky says there is no matter that has no intelligence. There is no consciousness that has no some kind of matter. So in this activation of matter, also there is an awakening of intelligence there. And you can see it with a baby, a fetus. The fetus is being formed, and an intelligence is beginning to be developed as the organism develops, right? So this matter, the cosmic matter, is the body of the Logos. And as the body of the Logos develops, it allows for the manifestation of divine thought or the divine mind. And here is when the Logos is born. Then the radiant child of the two, of the father and the mother, pre-cosmic, before there is a cosmos, the radiant child of the two, the unparalleled, refulgent glory, emerges from what was the undifferentiated substance. He is the newly manifested deity, the blazing divine dragon of wisdom. So you see all these words, the deity is connected to wisdom, to to light, to glory. This is when the deity of the system emerges, appears. And then the first manifestation of that intelligence, he produces the 7 primordial beings, in whom are the second 7, which become the 30, or the hosts and the multitudes of celestial beings. So that intelligence, and this is going to be dealt with in later stanzas, but that primordial intelligence begins to manifest through different beings. So Blavatsky says we are the logos that has been differentiated into a human being. Each of us is a ray of the logos. The intelligence of nature is the logos. The laws of nature is the logos. What keeps the atoms together here is the logos. The logos is that intelligence and that capacity to bring order and reason into matter, which interpenetrates everything. If you leave matter on its own, the principle of entropy, matter tends to disgregate, to disintegrate. If we don't keep up the buildings, after 50 years, they are all, in rumbles. But there is something in nature that counteracts that entropy, that makes matter come together and create a form. That is not intrinsic in matter. That's an external form that overcomes the entropy that is the nature of matter to create a form. That force is the logos. It's not just, we call it chemistry and all of those things on the physical plane, but the principle behind the physical plane that does that is the logos acting on the physical plane. And the logos is keeping our bodies together. Our intelligence is the expression of the logos working through the brain. And we think we are individuals because we identify with the brain, but all enlightened beings realize I am the logos. This is what we are. We are the logos expressing through different forms. So here the logos begins. The first differentiation or emanation of beings are the 7 primordial celestial beings. Again, in most traditions you have that the highest beings are 7. Clemens of Alexandria, the church father, would talk about, I think he called them protogonos or something like that, the first 7 celestial beings. And you have that also in Hinduism or in Christianity they call it the 7 angels before the throne of God many times. In theosophy there is this idea. There are 7 primordial celestial beings that are emanated, and then from those 7 primordial beings there are further emanations of beings. And then the logos shuts out the realm of the higher realities and leaves the lower planes to be seen as the great illusion. When manifestation begins, we lose sight of reality, we see only the illusion. There is like, you are in the theater, there is the curtain that is down, and that is like pralaya. Then the curtain is lifted and you see the drama of evolution, the play of evolution. The shloka uses that term. It says the logos unfurls the veil from east to west, and let's see the illusion, the great illusion of evolution. He turns the spiritual plane into a shoreless sea of fire, and the one manifested element into the great waters. Light is called flame, and flame is fire, and fire produces heat, which yields water, the water of life in the great mother chaos. This is an allegorical way of talking about the process that matter goes through before forms can be created. Scientists say at the beginning everything is really hot, then that has to cool down so that atoms can come together. When there is too much heat, the atoms have too much energy and they cannot come together, they cannot settle. So the universe cools down until matter can come together and create forms. So there is a long time, or whatever amount of time, that matter needs, so when it says first, light is called flame, that light is the ray of the logos, the vibration, where matter is still inert, so there is no heat. But then matter is activated and heat is produced. And then there is a process of maturation of matter until it comes to what we would call today the atoms, let's say, which are now ready for the next stage, that is beginning to create forms through which consciousness can evolve. So before we go to that, I will take a break before we go to that, but any question or comment? Yeah.
Yeah, could you, you may not be able to, but can you say something about that sequence, about light is called flame, and that whole symbology of that sentence is?
Yeah. Yes, I don't know that Blavatsky explained them specifically, but that sequence is frequently there. So first you have light is called flame. The way that I interpret that is that that vibration, because the idea is that matter at the beginning is inert in the sense that it's not really manifested. There is the essence of matter there, and there is this light of the logos, as it is sometimes called, that begins to make that matter manifest into the first state of manifested matter, which later on, as we will see, will continue to manifest. We are talking about spiritual aspects of matter, not physical matter at this point. So first is called flame, indicating that matter is inert. Then the flame is fire. So that fire to me is the energy that will start moving matter, which develops heat. That's what we see in science. So when you have motion produces heat. What we call heat is the vibration within the atom. So you have the cold flame that generates an energy in matter, that generates that motion that creates heat, and then heat yields water. And to me, that normally the chaos, the original matter from which the cosmos is built in earlier philosophies, were many times talked about as water, the water of life. So to me, when it says heat yields water, it means the matter that has cooled down enough so that structures can be built, which you see in the cosmic processes, as I mentioned. Yes. Yes. Go ahead. I don't know who was. Judy.
Yes, the question of consciousness seems to be very central here. In the time of the first Logos, is she talking about consciousness in an arupa form? Because there isn't any yet formal universe. So how can we talk about consciousness? It's not the consciousness we have, which manifests individuality, but it seems that consciousness has got to be everywhere and never without some form of existence in the universe, or there wouldn't be a universe.
Yeah.
It seems to be very central, even in a state of pralaya, where the consciousness is asleep, but it's still there.
Yeah, yeah.
Is she talking about?
I would say consciousness is as central as matter is, and that's as central as energy is. I think we have a bias toward consciousness, thinking that consciousness is higher than the other two aspects. And the theosophical teachings propose that the three aspects are actually three aspects of the same reality. So neither is higher than the other. So even in pralaya, you have a kind of consciousness that is that non-consciousness, because it's not the consciousness as we know it. You have a kind of matter, which is that spiritual essence of matter. Blavatsky calls it mula prakriti, the root of what will become matter. And then you have that motion, ceaseless motion, that is the source of what will become energy. So the three are always there, potentially or actively expressed in different ways. So if you see the shlokas 3, 4, and 5, they have some sequency, but they also recap the whole process from these 3 points of view. Shloka 3, as we see here, talks about what happens with matter. Then Shloka 4 talks about what happens with consciousness, with the emanation of all the celestial beings. And Shloka 5 is what happens with energy, with Fohat. So we have a constant transformation of the three aspects as the universe develops. And this will become more evident, the importance, because in science they know, okay, matter and energy have always been there, but they don't know about consciousness. So what the shlokas will show is how consciousness is as fundamental in the development of the cosmos as matter and energy are. And that will become more evident in the next stanza.
Okay, thank you, Pablo. This is a question about this sloka. Could you talk about a little more about this water? Why does sloka use this word water in this context? Why is related to life, water of life?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see something more than a physical explanation about this water? Thank you, brother.
I mean, as I mentioned, many philosophies use water as a symbol, though not all of them. And you see the pre-Socratic, philosophers, some propose that water was the origin, another fire, and they all are different aspects. I mean, I would say if you talk about the energy, the origin as energy, that would be fire. The origin as water, as matter, that would be water. Water is formless, so that chaos, that matter with no form, I think the symbol of water can be used for that. Also, life can only come when there is water, so the water of life, so that primordial substance is what allows the manifestation of life. I think it's a universal symbol that water is often connected to the primordial substance before forms appear. That's all I could say. Okay, we said that we had come to a point where matter was ready to be used to create forms, and that's what the next shloka talks about. It says, Father, Mother spin a web, and the idea of web is, when you connect different nodes, in this case it would be the atoms that begin to be connected to create forms. When we talk about atoms here, we are talking about spiritual matter. In theosophy there are several planes. The physical plane is the last plane to be developed. So this is happening on spiritual planes, but there is a form of matter and energy and consciousness there. So the next step we are saying is to start bringing atoms together and creating forms, because it is only through forms that consciousness, intelligence can express itself. In one of the shlokas, I didn't read that part, but when the first stanza says the universal mind was not, because there were no beings to contain and express it. So mind, to be manifested, always needs an organism, an entity, a form. So here comes, after activating the matter and having made the matter mature, in a sense, comes now the work of creating forms. So, and this is done by Father, Mother. Normally Blavatsky called Father, Mother the second logos. There are three logoi in the theosophical tradition. The first logos is unmanifested, is the first vibration. Then the second logos is one in which duality is there but not yet separate. That's why you have father, mother as the two polarities together. And the third logos is the sun, the manifested, which is the demiurge. In Greek philosophy, demiurge is the artisan. The third logos is the one that gets his hands dirty in creating forms. Of course, the logos itself is the architect, the one that gives the blueprint, and then there are all the masons who are the celestial beings who bring that plan into action. But it seems that, whatever that may mean, that from the father-mother aspect is where the basic life impulse for atoms to come together come. And that is because it is from father-mother that Fohat comes. So this is what the next shloka says. Then the father-mother sends Fohat to harden the atoms. Each is a part of the web of the universe, reflecting the self-existent Lord. Like a mirror, each becomes in turn a world. So each atom becomes a world. Here the word atom is used in a symbolic way. It can refer to the divine sparks that will become a human being, or the divine sparks that will become a world, or, But basically the idea is that here is where Fohat, this energy, comes into play, so that through Fohat, and we will see that in a couple of stanzas, through Fohat things are collected and organized in forms. And this is where the third stanza ends, when matter is ready to start creating forms. So then the fourth stanza goes a little back. Remember that here in the third stanza, the celestial beings were mentioned. The third logos appears, the sun, who emanates celestial beings. But this stanza doesn't talk about them. It follows matter. And now in the next stanza, we go back and see what happened with those celestial beings. So stanza 4 is the septenary hierarchies of celestial beings. And Blavatsky says the differentiation of the germ of the universe into the septenary hierarchy of conscious divine powers, who are the active manifestations of the supreme energy. So see here the idea conscious divine powers are the manifestation of the energy. And we will see what that means. So this is a complex stanza full of numerical statements which Blavatsky didn't really explain. She says, I can't, she wasn't allowed to explain this too much, but we have some general hints as to what this means. So the shloka says, from the effulgence of light, the ray of the ever darkness, so it goes back to when the ray of the Logos came and activates matter, and in activating matter, it activates also consciousness in a sense, or allows consciousness to develop. So from that ray sprang in space the reawakened energies, the hierarchies of celestial beings, the 1 from the 0, the 6, and the 5. And this forms the number 1065. I'll talk a little about that later. And then, after these hierarchies of celestial beings that Blavatsky identifies with the number 1065, then a lower bunch of hierarchies come, which is then the 3, the 1, the 4, the 1, the 5, 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, which resembles the pi number. The pi number is 3.141529, and it goes to infinity. So that may mean that the celestial beings also are infinite, basically. So then this comes, the twice 7, the sum total. You see, if you add all the digits of 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, that gives you 14, which is the twice 7, the totality. And these celestial beings are the essences, the flames, the elements, the builders, the numbers, the formless gods, and those with bodies, and the force of the divine man, the sum total. So here the stanza describes all different kinds of hierarchies of celestial beings. Again, Blavatsky was asked about who they were, and she said, no, I can't tell you about that. First, she wasn't allowed for some reason, and second, she said, if I were to describe all the hierarchies of celestial beings, it would take 100 volumes. She said something like that. And then she says, and from the divine man, even the divine man is not clear what it means, but it may mean like the monad, the divine spark, like the Adam Kadmon in Kabbalah, the celestial man, the archetype of what a human being is. And from the divine man emanated the forms, the sparks, the sacred animals, and the messengers of the sacred fathers within the holy 4 lower planes. It is said that all kingdoms of nature in evolution are aiming toward becoming a human being. A human being is the archetype for all the lower kingdoms. So this divine man may be that archetype of a perfect human being that then all the lower kingdoms are following. So maybe the forms, the sparks, it refers to the lower kingdoms, elementals, minerals, vegetables, animals, and then the messengers of the sacred fathers. That's a technical term for those who participated in the development of the human form, within the holy 4 lower planes. So first, I'll talk about that when, let me talk about that here. So we see 3 levels here. First, the first hierarchy is 1065. Now, 1065, if you add 10 plus 6 plus 5, that gives you 21, which is 3 times 7. Blavatsky mentions that. So you see that all this is connected to number 7 in one way. And the idea is that these hierarchies that are identified with the number 1065 are the first gods that are emanated, the gods on the higher planes, the gods on the spiritual planes. And then the next number, the number that is connected to pi is a way to calculate the circumference of a circle. So pi is connected to a circle. So Blavatsky says these hierarchies are the ones that set the boundary, the circle, within which the evolving monads are going to develop. So she says there is like a ring pass knot. There is like a boundary that the divine sparks cannot go beyond until they have transcended the evolution within this circle. So all these hierarchies that are connected to the pi number are the hierarchies on the lower planes that in which we as monads are developing. When we get to the end of human evolution, then we can begin to experience the higher worlds, the worlds of the primordial gods, let's say. Now, this ring pass knot concept is very interesting. Blavatsky said there are ring pass knots everywhere in the cosmos. For most of us, sleep is a ring pass knot. When we go to sleep, we lose awareness. But with development, you can go into sleep without losing awareness, with continuity of consciousness. Then death is another ring pass knot. But adepts are able to to retain a continuity of consciousness from incarnation to incarnation. Then there are also ring pass knots. She said there is a ring pass knot around the earth. So people are not going to be able to leave the earth, she said. And there was a discussion. So how would that work? They would say, this was in the late 1800s. So if we send somehow a ship or something outside the earth, would this hit a wall or something? And Blavatsky didn't know how that would work. But she says, all I know is that there is a ring pass knot. Now it's interesting that the astronauts, when they are in space, they start to disintegrate physically and psychologically. If they stay too long, even mentally and psychologically, they start to have problems. So there may be something that we cannot really live away from the Earth, and that would be a protection that the cosmos has to prevent basically a Star Wars scenario. We always say, how come there are no other beings from other planets more advanced that there should be? How come they don't come to the Earth? If you don't take into account the UFOs, that those can be anything, not necessarily spaceships. But then the universe may have this system by which you cannot physically leave your planet for too long to prevent interfering with other planets. Now there is an explanation. How would that work? Well, our subtle bodies are made of the matter of the Earth. So our astral body, our emotional body, let's say, is made of the astral plane of the Earth. And it is said that the astral plane of the Earth gets to the moon, more or less. So I imagine that if you escape the planet and you escape the astral body of the Earth, because the astral body is constantly interchanging matter as we do physically, perhaps your astral body starts disintegrating. Now the mental body is wider, so your mental body is still within the atmosphere of the mental body of the Earth, but perhaps you cannot leave physically the Earth too far because your astral body starts disintegrating. So if that is true, then that's, as I was saying, a mechanism to prevent people from going physically. Now spiritually, you can go to other or perceive other planets. Actually, Blavatsky says that we have been helped by higher evolutions from other planets, but they didn't come by a spaceship. They came from the inner planes and incarnated as human beings. Anyway, so this 31415 is about that ring pass knot within which we evolve, and that it shields us from external influences on whatever level you are interpreting this. And then all these hierarchies was the army of the mother's voice, the divine septenary. When the secret doctrine talks about the aspect of emanation of hierarchies of celestial beings, it talks about the female aspect of the logos, the mother of the gods. So it's interesting also to see when the secret doctrine talks about the logos as he, and when it talks about the logos as she. And of course the logos has no physical gender, but it does reflect some functions, polarities, some, in nature that are more or less reflected in human or female bodies. But again, when giving birth to celestial beings is talked about in the female way. So this was the army of the voice, the divine septenary. The sparks or monads of the seven primordial beings are subject to and servants of the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and the seventh of the primordial seven. Here the idea is that when we manifest as a divine spark, we manifest not directly from the logos, we manifest through one of these seven primordial beings. So the logos is like the white light, but when the white light manifests, it manifests through a prism, let's say, in the seven prismatic colors. So our monads manifest through one of the rays. Let us talk about the rays in terms of color. Your monad may have emanated through the red ray or the orange or the green or, one of those 7. And there is an occult relationship between all the monads, Blavatsky explains, that emanated through the same ray. She says, that is our Father in heaven, Blavatsky says. That is specifically the path through which we ascend to eventually realize the totality. And that has a lot of consequences in the spiritual life. For example, any disciple of the Masters of Wisdom can have only a Master of Wisdom that belongs to the same ray as the disciple. Then the paths, the spiritual path that you take will depend on what way you emanated from. For you, it will be more natural to go through one way or the other, depending to what way your monad belongs to, etc. But anyway, the Secret Doctrine talks about several times, even in the 2nd volume, there are 7 different groups of men that Blavatsky says this is because there are the people who came from the different rays. So there are mentions to these 7 rays every now and then, but Blavatsky didn't go too deep in commenting on that. Suva Rao, who was this other disciple, he wrote a little more about it. And then here again, Blavatsky says these are again a restatement of some hierarchies connected to this stage. So these sparks are called spheres, triangles, cubes, lines, and modelers. For that stands the eternal chain of causes of existence, the deity. So the way I see it is that through each of the rays, you have all these different kinds of monads that manifest, that are symbolized here by these geometrical, figures, let's say. And here the stanza just sums up who the deity is. The deity which is first darkness, the boundless or the no number, the primeval cause of existence, the spirit substance. So this is the non-manifested part. And then enclosed in that boundless space that is that unmanifested deity comes the primeval ancient, the number 1, the number for he is 1, that would be like the first logos probably, the voice of the world, the spirit substance, the numbers for he is 1 and 9, and then the formless square. So this is, again, Blavatsky doesn't explain too much what this is, but this is probably like the first logos. Then the manifested logos is the voice of the word, 1 and 9. So you have the absolute is no number, 0. The first logos is the 1, that is the source of everything. And then you have the manifested logos, that is all the numbers, that the numbers are differentiated, and out of that you will have all the numbers that are possible. And then you have the formless square. Square is always a symbol of matter. So here is probably the cosmic matter, those waters. And these are the foundation, Blavatsky says. And these 3, plus the boundless circle, are the sacred 4, the foundation of the cosmos. She referred to this as tetractys. Tetractys is a symbol from Pythagoras. And for them, the tetractys was the highest deity. They would take oaths, swearing or committing to the tetractys as the highest deity. Now, Blavatsky says there is a highest tetractys, there are lower tetractys, but this is the highest tetractys, the highest 4. Tetra means 4, right? So tetractys. And then from this highest deity come the sons, the 7 fighters, who are the spirits of the sacred planets, and the 1, the spirit of the sun, who is the 8th left out, and his breath, which is the light maker. So these 7 sacred, the spirits of the sacred planets are the heads of the 7 rays. Blavatsky explains that the planets are the physical manifestation of these 7 rays. So you could say the red ray that we talked about, that's the planetary spirit of Mars. Then the orange ray, that is the planetary spirit of what we call the sun, that Blavatsky says is not really the sun, is a planet that is between the sun and Mercury, but that right now is not visible, she would say. Then you have the yellow ray, that's the planetary spirit of Mercury, and so on. So here, for some reason, the stanza is recounting the process of manifestation. And then the sun of the system, which is the 8th left out, Blavatsky explains this talks about the need to separate the Earth from the planets on the physical plane, because at the beginning of the evolution of the solar system, the gravitational pull of the sun was threatening to draw all the planets into the sun, and then no life could be developed in the solar system. So there are some forces that intervene and separate the sun, the 8th, so that these 7 sacred planets can be developed. That's all she says more or less about that. And then come the second 7, who are the recorders of karma, produced by the 3, which would be the father or the divine thought, the mother or the voice, and the manifested word, that is the manifested logos. So first, second, and third logos, you can take that in that way. The idea is that you have the 3 logoi. Then you have the 7 primordial celestial beings through which everything will manifest. And then you have the next rank of celestial beings are the rulers of the cosmos, the karmic lords. These are the ones that keep an eye on how evolution develops. So this tells you that evolution is not just mechanical, like science proposes. It's not random. It's not purposeless. There is a divine plan behind the creation of the cosmos, or the development of the cosmos. And there are deities that are regulating how the cosmos develops, even down to human beings. What is happening today in the world, that many people are afraid and think that we are going to destroy the world and all that, from the theosophical point of view, we are not really able to destroy the world. We are able to create a lot of unnecessary suffering for us, but there are external powers that are ruling this process of evolution. And in the second volume of the Secret Doctrine, Blavatsky says that the previous civilization that we call Atlantis became too close to absolute evil, and then this power stepped in, then the continent was sunk, and then civilization started again. I mean, some people were saved so that civilization can start again. But what I mean by this is that there are huge planetary, cosmic powers, conscious powers that are guarding the evolution of all systems. If we are not wise, we will produce a lot of suffering for ourselves, so it's far better to be as wise as possible. But there is a limit to how unwise we can be. We grow through suffering, we grow through problems, but if a certain line is crossed, then external forces will stop the system from, just going to ruins. That always brings a heavy karmic price, Blavatsky says, because of what we did in Atlantis. Of course, because of reincarnation, we were in Atlantis. A lot of the suffering of humanity today is because of what we did in Atlantis. So hopefully, we are a little wiser and we don't get to that point. But if we do get to a point, there are powers who can step in. In the meantime, all these celestial beings are trying to stimulate humanity so that things develop in the best possible way. And conflicts is part of growth. That we see conflicts in the world right now doesn't mean that necessarily that the world is is coming to an end or anything. This may be how we learn what things we should not repeat again. Like in Europe after the 2 world wars, that's what it took for the countries in Europe to come together and say, how can we ensure that this doesn't happen again? I mean, Europe has been in wars forever. The history of Europe is the history of wars. Who was in war with whom? And when it came to the point of the Second War especially, well, that was the line that, human beings drew and said, what can we do so that we don't repeat this? So, the troubles that we go through in the world may be what we need to get to some bottom until we say, okay, enough, we have to do something. And because we are not wise, that bottom can be quite low, but eventually, there are celestial powers that are helping evolution. So that's what the secret doctrine is presenting here. And the rejected sun is one, and the suns are countless. That talks about the different suns in different places. And now we come to the last stanza, which is a quite scientific stanza, because this is about how the cosmos begins to develop. And it's called Fohat, the child of the septenary hierarchies. And Blavatsky says the process of world formation is described, passing through the various transformations to form a solar universe, or a planetary chain, or a single planet, as the case may be. As I mentioned this morning, the stanzas can be applied to many different levels, and as I mentioned, Michelle will deal with that in the afternoon. So now it goes back to the 7 primordial celestial beings. They are the 7 first breaths of the dragon of wisdom, of the Logos, the first emanation of the Logos. And they, in their turn, from their own breaths, their own holy circumgyrating, like circular breaths, they produce the fiery whirlwind Fohat. So Fohat is a rotational energy. And you see rotation all over the cosmos. The sun rotates on its axis, the planets rotate on their axis, they rotate around the sun rotates around the galaxy, the atoms have their own spin, the subatomic particles, when they go through space, photons and all of that, they don't go straight, they go in spiral. So the rotating motion, which is also the origin of cycles, the cycles, when we talk about recycling, is the cycles of matter coming together, dispersing, coming together, dispersing. There is something in rotation, in cycle, in circles, which is essential in the cosmos. That's why the Greeks would say the circles are the perfect, the sphere or circle are the perfect figures or bodies. And they would say our soul is circular, which actually, the auric egg in human beings are kind of like an egg, and according to later theosophies, they said that the auric egg of adepts is circular. So maybe the Greeks had a reason why they would say that the soul is circular or spherical. Anyway, so we have this quality in Fohat. And then Fohat is the manifestation of their wisdom. So this energy that is behind nature is an intelligent energy. This is again why there is a plan in the cosmos. Science, even in evolution, there is no plan according to science. It's not that evolution is trying to produce a perfect organism. Current science says, no, there is no aim in evolution except for adaptation to the immediate environment. So if the environment degrades, the organisms will be less perfect than before because they are just adapting to the new environment. So this idea of purpose, plan, doesn't exist in science at all. Well, the secret doctrine is saying the essence of the cosmos is a plan. The essence of the cosmos is intelligence. Every single thing that happens to us is part of that plan. The energy is intelligent. It's the manifestation of the wisdom of the celestial beings. So their wisdom becomes Fohat. Fohat is this cosmic energy, the source of all the different energies that we see in the cosmos. They make of him, of Fohat, the messenger of their will. He is the steed, the horse, and their thought, their wisdom, is the rider. And then here is a more scientific description, how Fohat generates planets, which is amazingly similar to what science has seen. I gave a lecture just comparing the stages that Fohat does to create a planet with what science has observed, and it matches very well. So Fohat runs circular errands. He passes like lightning through the fiery clouds of cosmic matter. That's the cosmic matter in the, where solar systems are created. He takes 3 and 5 and 7 strides through the 7 planes above and the 7 below. That's more esoteric. It begins to differentiate matter in the 7 planes at the macrocosm level and at the level of the planet. He lifts his voice and calls the innumerable sparks, the atoms, and joins them together. So Fohat is what is behind the aggregation of matter. Now science says that what brings the aggregation of matter is gravity. Blavatsky says that gravity is not a real force in nature. It's the result of other processes. Quantum physics has found particles for all the forces except for gravity. Gravity is what doesn't allow quantum physics and relativity to come together, because they are still operating with the idea that gravity is a force. Blavatsky says it's not a force, so if she's right, they will never find the graviton, what they call the graviton, because it doesn't exist, because it's not a force. But then the problem is that the cosmic processes are described in terms of gravity. All the formula and all that, how the solar systems form and all that. Now, they see that when they apply those cosmic forces to the actual observations, the amount of matter that is in a system that is being brought together and the gravity that generates is not enough to explain the development of the system. So there should be, if gravity was the force, there should be far more gravity in the system, which means there should be far more mass in the system, but we don't see the mass. So where is that mass? Well, let us invent the concept of dark matter. There must be matter there, but it's dark, we don't see it. To me, this is all because they are calculating based on gravity, and they are not taking Fohat into account, which Blavatsky says on the physical plane, Fohat is electromagnetism. Now, why they don't take electromagnetism into account? Because they cannot measure the electromagnetic fields in faraway systems. It's very difficult to measure it. But more and more, they are beginning to see how the light travels and the magnetic fields, and they are discovering more and more that, yes, electromagnetism is actually involved in the development of the solar system. If the secret doctrine is right, my guess is that they will discover eventually that electromagnetism is the only force that is bringing matter together, which is what this shloka is saying. Fohat is the one that calls the innumerable sparks and joins them together. He is their guiding spirit and leader. When he commences work, he separates the sparks of the lower kingdoms, the mineral atoms, that float and thrill with joy in their radiant dwellings, which are these gaseous clouds that you can see in the nebulas. So he separates and forms therewith the germs of the wheels. The wheels are the future planets, the worlds in the becoming. He places them in the 6th direction of space and one in the middle, the central wheel. This refers to a planetary chain that each planet is connected to other 6 non-physical globes. We don't need to go into that. But then Fohat traces spiral lines to unite the 6th to the 7th, the crown, thus conjoining the first differentiation with the ever unconditioned reality. I don't want to go into all the details, but Fohat is the bridge from the higher to the lower planes. We have access to the higher planes because of the thread of Fohat that is within us. Fohat is the one that produces that kind of bridge. And then an army of sons of light, celestial beings, at each angle, stands at each angle to watch over the evolutionary process. This is what I was mentioning. The celestial beings are ruling, watching over, and if necessary, intervene in the evolutionary process. And the recorders, the lords of karma, stand in the middle wheel. The middle wheel is the physical planet, which is the play of karma. The karmic causes are manifested in the physical planet, the earth. So this is the earth. Blavatsky would say, the only hell that exists is the physical earth. It is on the physical earth that comes the play of karma and suffering and joy, and also the astral light around the earth that she says is like an emanation of the earth. But on the higher planes there is no suffering. Suffering exists only in physical earth. This is where the lords of karma are working with the karmic causes we produce, so that what happens helps us grow and evolve. And then when the recorders say this is good, then the first divine world is ready, and then they do the same with each of the worlds. So see that what this stanza is telling you is that the whole process is being watched over and approved, so to say, by celestial beings. The first manifested world is now the second, and then there is, the third. We don't need to go into the details. We are just finishing up here, but the idea is that all these worlds manifest plane after plane. Fohat takes 5 strides, first encompassing the 5 higher planes, and builds worlds on those super-physical planes. And again, puts the recorders there with their hosts to watch after evolution. The recorders, and this is the last one in the series, and the recorders circumscribe the triangle, the first vertical line, the cube, the second vertical line, and the pentacle within the circle. So we have again, this is what I mentioned before. The celestial beings enclose the system within this ring pass knot, and it says it separates the world of pure spirit from that of matter for those celestial beings who descend and ascend, and those monads who, during that cycle, during the eon, are progressing or evolving toward the great day be with us, the great day where everything returns to the one. Thus were formed the formless world and the world of forms. From one light, 7 lights, from each of the 7 times 7 lights, the wheels watch the ring. So these are all details that would take too much time to go into them, but I think the general view here is that the whole development of the cosmos and the evolution there is produced by an intelligent energy, Fohat, and is always ruled by celestial beings that help the system continue to progress. So that's the end of the journey. I'm sorry that it was so much, but I know the time is up, but is there any last question or comment before we?
We have a question online.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, brother. Splendid final explanation. Very inspired. So I have a reflection that I want to share with you. and to give to me and to everyone's if this reflection is right or is correct, or you can see some relation about that you are mentioning this moment. It's related to about matter and soul, spirits that are unit, because this intelligent energy, Fohat, that you mentioned, that is wisdom, that's you know, guide the evolution of the systems. Well, you exemplify the intervention of this higher intelligence over the four race, Atlantis. Okay, so this about this energy, intelligent energy, Fohat, that is wisdom, and all these hierarchies that govern and guide the evolution of the humanity. This could imply that if many souls got or developed wisdom, this require the future that necessarily need to be have better bodies for these more evolutionary souls, and this means that the race will need to be different in its structure, maybe, and better as civilization. Why? That the that let these higher souls can incarnate in this um, race, because the bodies are prepared to receive these souls. So so in this way, make a change in our life in this moment. Try to wake up to this wisdom, to live in the theosophy perspective of life, could make useful for the progress of the mankind in general, talking about the race, the next race.
Yeah.
Because this
Yeah,
is this matter and spirit are there, and this intelligence. What is your opinion? Is right this reflection? Thank you, brother.
I get your point. So yes, Blavatsky says that the evolution proceeds both at the level of consciousness and matter, at the level of the bodies. The bodies of the next root race will be quite different from the bodies of this current root race. Root race is a cycle. And we push the evolution of matter by means of the evolution of consciousness. Now, there are some cycles that are chronological, and the bodies will begin to transform en masse when the time is appointed, but before that, Blavatsky says there will be some bodies that are different from the rest, that will be regarded as freaks, and that's the bodies for those early souls that may be born in different bodies. So yes, this all happens, and this is part of us being co-workers of nature. If as we evolve, we help nature also evolve. So, but yes, that's part of the second, what Blavatsky explains in the second volume. So let us finish here. So this afternoon, Michelle will take these stanzas and show some applications, how you can apply this in different ways and interpret this in different ways. So thank you everyone for your participation, your presence, and we'll see you in the afternoon. Bye-bye everyone.